Hopefully you guys can see us. Send some chats if you can't, or if you're just not video or something like that. And also put your questions, save them to the end, put them in the chat, and then Galen will read them off to me at the end. All right, we got a little, that looks like that's a Zoom thing up top.
Yep, it says it's sharing, so it looks.
All right, looks professional. Okay, folks, here are my slides. And we'll do the questions at the end. All right. The foundation. Those of you who've been watching my thing, last couple of talks know my thoughts about soil. And so that's where this all begins, even though we're talking about disease and pests. The foundation of the principles that I'm about to explain, all are based coming from the soil and the environment. There it is. Healthy soil equals healthy plants. Unhealthy plants are disease and pest ridden. Pests cannot function well, whether it's a disease or a insect, in situations where the plant is very strong and healthy. Typically, that's almost enough to get the whole job done. When there's a weakness in the plant and some deficiency somewhere, that's where we begin to see disease and insects take advantage of that and really capitalize on it. So the very first most important thing is to grow a healthy plant. Okay, so we're going to do a little quick review in case we need to, but that's the premises of disease and pest control, particularly for organic. It is for chemical as well, but we don't talk about that here. And that's my quick little note for everyone on Zoom. When I say the word pesticide or fertilizer or something, I'm talking about organic, the derived ones. And also if I say just pests, I'm referring to pests and disease. I'll try to use insects when it's appropriate. Everything I say is also relative to fruit trees as well as ornamentals and vegetables, but we'll probably talk about more about veggies. All right. So healthy soil equals healthy plants, and that starts with the soil food web. We talked about that in our first class. The soil food web is the rhizosphere is where the root system is. It's the root cycle, the root area. That's where all either interactions between the organisms, the microorganisms in the soil that are going to deliver the nutrients that your plant needs to grow healthy. The plant's going to tell those microorganisms what they need. They're going to feed them, and then they're going to let them go do the work, and they're going to bring back the nutrients. The soil food web, it's a cycle, and it's run on minerals and organic matter and oxygen and carbon. So we're going to, I'm going to not talk too much about that, but the soil food web is where this all begins. We need to foster that part so we can have healthy plants. Compost, compost, and more compost. That's how we're going to foster this soil food web. We're going to do that. That's one of the ways we're going to do that, okay, is by getting enough compost on Cape Cod with our sandy soils, like I mentioned earlier in my previous talk. Really important to keep adding organic matter every year. We can't let up, okay? Last year's compost doesn't help this year at all. We need to get compost or some other way of feeding the soil first. Cover crops is another great way of doing it, but cover crops also will increase and help the soil food web, but in terms of disease and pest, they'll also help break up cycles and help eliminate with crop rotation using cover crops as a tool. By not growing a vegetable crop or a flower crop in its place one year and growing just a cover crop, that's a really, really effective way of getting soil-borne organisms, such as tomato blight, late blight, all sorts of your tomato problems, a lot of your other problems, disease-wise, is coming from soil-borne organisms. So if we break the cycle by doing, even if it's just 2 square feet, break it up in your little gardens, okay, with some cover crops. Mulch, another great way to foster getting organic matter back into the soil to help build the soil food web and foster that, okay? pH of fertility, microbes like a certain pH. They'll eventually on their own, after some initial applications of limestone, once they get going, they'll create their own pH environment and they'll maintain it and regulate it themselves, okay? Whoop, what happened there? Oh. All right, KNF stands for Korean Natural Farming. We're gonna do that next week. So that's another very great way to foster the soil food web and to help develop a strong, healthy soil food web. It's a huge topic, and it will be covered in next week's talk. My last talk, which is Beyond Organic, I think it's called, where we're going to talk about regenerative agriculture, biodynamic gardening and farming, and Korean natural farming. All right, natural defenses. Nature has already built in its own pesticide defenses, and that's how the world has evolved for hundreds of thousands of years here. Okay, so plants and pests, well, let's just call them plants and insects or diseases, have coexisted forever. That's how evolution's happened. So there is a natural defense mechanisms in the soil, in the plants themselves, that can defend the plants on their own. A healthy plant can use natural defenses to defend itself. So soil microorganisms can actually get up into the plant. They're called endophytes. Okay, they can get into the plants, funguses, yeast, molds, bacteria from the soil through into the plant and help defenses. Also create something called an allelopathic process, where the plant will produce substances in this root system that will defend itself from invading plants that might over and compete it, such as the eucalyptus plant, a tree, that is. So it puts in its own toxins, its own herbicides into the soil naturally, with bacteria and funguses doing the work. So they can control disease organisms within the plant. These are microorganisms living in a plant that does the work. They're called endophytes, and it's extremely cool stuff. All right, beneficial insects and pest control. Beneficial insects are what we want to do. We'll just call them the good bugs, because that's what a lot of people coin them. So these are the insects that are feeding on the bad bugs. And the only reason it's a bad bug is because it's eating your flowers or eating your vegetables or your apples or something. That's the only reason it's a pest, is because humans have labeled it that way. If it's not eating your crops or your whatever, or your flowers, then it's not a pest. It's just another insect on the planet that's meant to be here for certain reasons. Okay, so beneficial insects will go ahead and keep in check the pests that we have, the bad bugs that we have that we're trying to get rid of. A great example is the tomato hornworm, a rather large looking worm that people will find on the tomatoes, can decimate overnight, can eat a whole plant practically. It's a big one. There's the trichoderma wasp that lays its eggs inside the worm. The worm continues to live as the eggs are developing, as the eggs hatch out. These little microscopic wasps, very tiny, then fly out of the egg casings, and then the tomato hornworm is dead. Okay, nature took care of it. Okay, it's just a balance. Okay, it's the way that these wasps, these very special wasps, are able to do their work and keep down and feed. All right, Galen, are you here?
Yep.
There's someone at the door that may want to come in. I'm not sure.
I'll get it.
How to foster soil microbes and beneficial insects. Well, we know how to do the soil microbes. We just talked about that. That's fostering the soil food web. If we have a nice diversity of microbes in the soil, those endophyte ones can get up into the plant and help defend the plant. Okay. And how do we foster beneficial insects? By doing, well, we do planting in regenerative agriculture, at least it's called banker plants. We grow plants that aren't there to give us a crop or money, but we're banking them in there so that they create what's called an insectary, a beneficial insectary, a place where there's rich in nectar and habitat for the beneficial insect to rear its young, to get its young going, and then the young can go out into your fields and go eat the pests that you're having problems with. So there's a lot of great seed mixes available. Johnny's Selected Seeds, we've already talked about them last time, and we're going to talk about it again tonight. John has a great catalog. They have a beneficial insect seed mix. You should sprinkle it everywhere you go. It's flowers and herbs. So sprinkle them wherever you can, not in your main garden, because that's going to be where your main produce is, on the edges of your garden, over by your house. Anywhere that you can get these flowers to grow, they'll bring in beneficial insects. particularly of the umbel flower shape, like the dill flower, Queen's Anne's lace, what else? Carrots. I mean, there's that type of flower is very beneficial, has a lot of good nectar for beneficial insects. Now, remember, most of these beneficial insects are very small, so they need small flowers to get in there, but some of them are big. Okay, whoop, that's weird. All right, is that the next slide?
Go back another one.
Yes, it is. Okay, pests and diseases, the strategies. Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of this discussion. I put prevention in there because it's really important. We're going to have a healthy soil, so we're going to work at healthy soil that's going to create a healthy plant. That's a preventative measure to keep pests away. Okay, we're going to plant insectaries. We're going to plant beneficial gardens. That's another preventative measure. Okay, we need to prevent diseases and pests, particularly in organic gardens. We can't just go to our chemical pesticide or fungicide and spray it down with 7 and kill everything that's known to man and poison all our water and everything else. Okay, and then kill, by the way, the microbes that we're trying to foster in the first place. So prevention is so important. Okay, we have to look at our disease and pest control as a preventative measure. And at the end during questions, someone's going to have a question, I would imagine, about tomatoes and diseases, and we'll talk about the importance of prevention in that situation. But with organic disease control on your fruit trees, vegetables, and flowers, critical to prevent it from happening in the first place. Work on preventive measures, and that's going to be a huge step in the right direction. Okay, healthy soil. We already talked about that. I'm going to just beat this home all night probably. That's where it starts. If we're going to do that, that's got to be the first strategy in our disease and pest control. Is healthy soil. Beneficial insects. I'm not going to. Oh look, it's got a small arrow instead of a big arrow. Okay, so beneficial insects. Once again, let's foster it. Let's get them going. Let's give them a home. Let's give them some water, and they'll be happy. Okay. Crop rotation, I started to touch on that. If we're using crop rotation as a disease and pest management tool, we're able to break up cycles of tomato blight and things like that, or soil-borne organisms, where we don't plant, as if you remember from our last talk about crop rotation, we don't plant the same families in the same location. This is the reason why. We want to break cycles. So if we grow tomatoes or anything in the nightshade family, peppers, eggplant, potatoes, tomatoes, ground cherries, tomatillos, all those plants are in the nightshade family. They cannot be grown in the same location. They should not be grown in the same location, ideally. Okay. Following that, it's a good thing to get a different crop that doesn't have susceptibility. And if another crop following does have a susceptibility, then we want to make sure we break up that section of the garden with a cover crop. Preferably a green manure, because that's going to build healthy soil. Green manures are leguminous plants. Okay. All right. Crop rotation, very important. Seed selection. This is another way we can do some preventative measures. Now, generally speaking, with open pollinated heirloom, because that's what an heirloom seed is an open pollinated seed. Generally speaking, they're going to have low disease resistance. Okay. Hybrid seeds, which is mostly what you can get in the world, are going to have some form of disease resistance. And if you choose the proper ones, particularly for things like squashes, zucchinis, tomatoes, cucumbers for sure, corn, those types of plants that I just mentioned are probably the top ones to really worry. If you can get a seed that has downy mildew resistance built into it, that's going to help your cucumber crop grow better. So in each catalog, you'll see advertising. A lot of times it will be abbreviated, I don't know what the abbreviations are, but they'll be in the key in each catalog, and I think they're pretty standardized. So things like powdery mildew resistance, those are the kind of seeds you want to get if you're going to grow zinnias or grapes or zucchini. Where else gets powdery mildew? Phlox. Okay, those are the things that get a lot of powdery mildew. So find those varieties, find those seeds that have the disease resistant built into it. Okay. They don't really have pest resistant too much. They did put some BT in corn, genetically modified stuff, but we're not talking about that. BT is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a bacteria they put in corn. they genetically modified it to create some nasty GMO seeds. Okay, so we don't talk about that. But the hybridization of seeds is everywhere. It's been going on for a long time. Look for disease resistance. Now, there are disease-resistant heirloom varieties, and I have, over the years, learned which ones I like and which ones are more or less disease-resistant, and those are the ones that I offer for sale at my stand. But there's a lot of research, and you can really dig into the heirloom seed world and open pollinated seeds, and look on the internet. There's a lot of information about which giant pink tomato is better disease resistant than others. For instance, Brandywine has got very poor disease resistance. A great, huge, beautiful pink giant tomato, but it doesn't grow a lot of fruit because it gets diseases too much. Where there's very similar tasting to Brandywine, if not even better, such as the Rose tomato. Rose is almost identical to Brandywine, except it wins more of the tomato contests over Brandywine, which has gotten all the fame back a few years back when heirloom seeds became very in fashion, which is where they should stay, by the way. Okay, so seed selection is also another way that we can prevent pests and diseases, okay? All right, mechanical techniques, things like pheromone traps, something that's a pheromone is a scent that an insect puts. A pheromone trap will pull the coddling moth into a trap, trap it with some stickiness where the pheromone is, and then that can't lay its eggs to make the worms. It's going to crawl up and get in your apples. Coddling moth is one of our major apple pests, and if you live on Cape Cod, you have coddling moth flying around all the time. So if you know that and you have some fruit trees, put up some coddling moth traps, okay? Because that is a way of doing it. It's a mechanical way of getting that insect dealt with, where we don't have to spray or do anything like that, okay? Another mechanical way is hand picking. Get down there, pick that worm off your cabbage and discard it, preferably to the chickens if you have them. If not, throw it in the compost pile. Kill it, throw their body in the compost pile. The cycle continues. We'll build the soil food web, okay? So other mechanical methods, floating row covers. The trade name that I use is called remake typically. It's just a trade name, but floating row covers is a polyester spun fiber that allows light and air and water through the fabric, but it creates a barrier like a blanket, a sheet over the plant. So when I plant my arugula and a bunch of my salad mix things, all the brassicas, I'll cover it immediately after I plant the seeds in my garden with floating row cover, and I'll bury the edges, and that prevents and slows down my flea beetle problem, okay? Flea beetles are a huge problem for salad greens, arugula. The little tiny holes you see there, you'll see them in your eggplant and your tomatoes as well, sometimes peppers. So mechanical way, let's just stop them. Another great place to use, floating row covers is with the striped cucumber beetle that all of you have, all of you have. The striped cucumber beetle, as it's flying over your garden, is looking for the leaf signature, that squash leaf that looks very, its signature. When it sees it, it's going to lay its eggs down there. It's going to land, and it's going to start feeding on your. It's going to start feeding. It's going to start destroying the plant, and that's going to lay its eggs, and then the cycle's going to continue. Okay. If there's a sheet over it and it flies over, it's just going to look like a white sheet. Okay. Floating row covers are white. It doesn't harm the plants. Actually, it helps the plants underneath because it creates a humidity dome. It also gives it some frost protectant. So you can actually get a bump in the growth. That's another cultural way that we grow vegetables a little bit quicker, as we use floating row covers as frost protectant. So you're going to get a little bit better growth, faster production of growth underneath, and you're going to cut off that life cycle of those insects. Squash bugs, there's a whole bunch of them that you can use this mechanical method of a barrier to block them from coming in. Mechanical would also probably be, I would probably throw slug, people put tin cans of beer in there and that kind of stuff for slugs. I'm going to throw that into mechanical too, although the beer part could be, it's not really it drowns them. It attracts them because the yeast and the sugars, the slugs are drawn to that beer trap, but it's still a trap in essence, just like a pheromone trap. Okay. So healthy soil, beneficial insects, crop rotation, seed selection, mechanical, that is the strategies first and foremost, okay, to prevent things from happening, okay? Oh, then the next one, sorry, is pesticide sprays and dust and oils, okay? And that's your typical toolbox, okay? These are all things in your toolbox, but these are the products that you're gonna need to have on hand, ready to go. And you don't wanna have the pest problem and then go running to your local nursery and get it, or go to Gardens Alive, a great catalog that we're going to learn about later, and get the stuff. You want to, if you've been gardening for a while, you know what pests you have. You have the European cabbage looper, you have the cabbage worm, you have the tomato hornworm. You have cucumber stripe beetles, you have powdery mildew, you have these problems already. So get ready, have a little bit on hand. Don't buy the agricultural size where it's hundreds of dollars. Go to Gardens Alive or Johnny's Selected Seeds, get the products for the homeowner, and it's a lot less expensive in the big run. And hopefully you won't need it. Hopefully. Okay. So those are our strategies. Those are the things we want to have in our toolbox. The main things are the pesticide sprays, dust and oils. I hope you never get to that point where you need that. It's always a last ditch effort to save your plants, okay? All right. Now we're going to get more into it. What pests do you have, okay? I just mentioned a whole bunch that I think all of you have, at least on Cape Cod, I know you have. But proper ID of your pests and diseases is critical, because then we know what we can do to get rid of them, or to help, at least get them, the numbers down to where it's not harming your plant. A plant can take a little bit of aphids, but when it hits a certain threshold, it's time to intervene, okay? Now, when do we intervene? Once we know when we have a pest, okay? Once we know what pest it is, it's time to intervene. And that's when this comes into play. Integrative pest management. It's a very conventional practice on conventional farms, organic farms, regenerative farms, gardens. You're going to take the same principles as integrated pest management and apply it to your garden on a smaller scale, of course. So you might have to change if you see something acres or whatever in your research with integrated pest management. You have to bring it down to square footage of your garden. Okay. Quick note: there's 443,560 square feet to the acre. So if you have that number in your head and you start seeing things like how many seeds per acre, how many is this, now you can start figuring out what square footage. 43,560 square feet to the acre, okay, is a good thing to remember. All right, integrative pest management. You can Google it. Basically, it's going to help first to identify what you have. Then you're going to start with finding out your threshold. So you have to ID it, find out how many numbers you have of something on a leaf. How many, do you have 10 aphids? Do you have 20 aphids? Do you have 60 aphids? If you have 10, you might not hit that threshold. At 12, you might be over the threshold, so it's time for intervention. And with IPM, the general concept is to start with the least the most environmentally safe method first, okay? And then work your way up to the chemicals. IPM, as you'll see in the process, will include chemical pesticides and fungicides. I will not in my talk or on my farms, but it will be at the bottom of the list for them, okay? So IPM doesn't mean organic, it just means it's a system of pest management, okay? Includes organic, biorational pesticides and fungicides, and then conventional, okay? So I'm gonna give you a quick link, and it's also gonna be at the end, so there's a slide at the end that everyone can look at, or get asked, you can always email me and I'll send you my PowerPoint, and you can review it yourself at home. Okay? UMass Extensions is who I work with a lot. They're a phenomenal agricultural school. I don't know if Ruth Hazard's still there, but she was my vegetable woman for a long time. If she is there, I commend her on her years of service. She's one of my teachers. She's taught me a lot. I didn't go to UMass Amherst, but I used the extension service in UMass all the time for my soils work and my pest work. So there is a link to their IPM page. Everything you need to know about IPM in the state of Massachusetts, and actually everywhere I would imagine, is in there. Fruits, also, vegetables, flour, all sorts of links there to everything. Everything you'd ever want to know about IPM is on that link. especially pertinent to the Northeast, okay? But it can be taken anywhere, all right? Every state has an agricultural school. That agricultural school is gonna have an IPM part on their website for sure. Purdue, Cornell, Rutgers, North Carolina, Tennessee are all some fabulous ones on this coast. Okay, that is gone. Now, the sprays. Now we're talking, we've got to the point where we've tried the barriers, we've tried the soil, healthy soil, we've tried all the mechanical means, and none of it's working. We've got too many squash bugs, okay? Time to bust out the big guns. In my case, that's an organic, what we call biorational pesticides and fungicides and herbicides, okay? Biorational is a good term to know, okay? So with any pesticide, whether it's organic or not, the label is the law. If it says 1 tablespoon or teaspoon per gallon, that's the law. It doesn't mean put 2 because you have really bad bug problem, okay? It means follow the label, okay? If it says repeat every 7 to 10 days, you don't repeat every 2 days because you have more squash bugs than your neighbors, okay? Your bug problem is as bad as it gets. Follow the label, it's the law. If you're a conventional farmer like myself, who has a pesticide applicator license, it's such the law that if I break it, I can lose my license, okay? The law is there also to protect the environment. So the label's there to protect the environment. So follow the label. Ombre sprays are sprays that are approved to use in organic production, okay? Ombre stands for Organic Materials Review Institute. They look at all the organic, so-called organic products and determine whether it is or not. Once it gets their OMRI certified label, I should have put that label in there. It's good to go for the most part. Okay. Now remember, this is the last ditch effort. We're not using pesticides and sprays and dust and oils unless we have to. Okay. That except for fruit trees where we need dormant oil spray before bud break. Okay, so look for the OMRI label. It's this little green thing. It'll be, trust me, if a pesticide or fertilizer company or anyone has gone through the process to get OMRI certified, they're going to let you know because it's cost them tens and tens of thousands of dollars to get that done. So if it's OMRI certified, it's a general way to consider it's okay. All right. Now here, so there's 2 types of sprays in our situation: biological sprays. These are bacteria. These are funguses. These are yeast sometimes, maybe. But biological means naturally something living, biological, an organism. Okay, Bacillus thuringiensis stands for BT. Okay, something we use all the time, and for decades we've been using it on our organic farms to kill Lepidoptera larvae, which is your cabbage worm and your any kind of worm that's crawling on your stuff. BT is one of the things we use to get rid of it. So BT is a perfect example of a bacteria that we spray on the plants to kill the bad bugs. Okay. We also spray funguses. Spinosad is the big one, and we'll talk about that with other pests. But it's a fungus, a living fungus. We spray it on our plants. They go ahead and do the work. Okay. Or if it's not biological, it's typically naturally derived. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example. Pyrethrum, not pyrethroid, like all the so-called mosquito people are spraying. Pyrethrum is naturally derived from the chrysanthemum flower, a specific chrysanthemum flower. The ground up seeds, and I think maybe the roots, are ground up into a fine powder. It's been used on organic farms since the 60s, even longer probably. Naturally derived, and you apply it. Now, does it mean it's good? Is it going to kill some good bugs? Why it's killing the bad bugs? Possibly. Okay, so we tend to want to go to biologicals first because it's a lot more host specific. When we start talking about naturally derived things like pyrethrum sprays, those types of things will kill a lot of things. So we really want to use that last. Okay, so that's what naturally derived means. Also, this naturally derived could mean oils, like horticulture oil is something we spray on plants, and particularly fruit trees, to smother the insects and to kill and to smother overwintering spores of diseases. Something we're going to spray on a fruit tree before the bud breaks because the oil can harm the flower. So we want to do it just before bud break, that the insects have had time to start to respire and then you suffocate them and they die. Okay, really important for fruit trees. I know that there may be a couple of fruit tree people logging on today because I've been communicating with some. So for fruit trees, very critical in this, very critical to do it organically with horticultural sprays, okay, horticultural oil, very important. Okay, another website, and this is really technical stuff. Okay, this is, you go to this website, it's not, there's gonna be no frills, there's gonna be no pictures. You're gonna put in your pests, you're gonna put in, or first you're gonna put in your, there's a series of boxes you gotta fill in, and then you're gonna click on it, and then it's gonna show up a page of a list of the organic controls that are allowed to use on organic farms. It'll say if it's OMRI certified in one of the lines in the columns. It's got everything you need to know, everything, and 1,000 times more things you don't need to know. So you'll have to drill down what your specific pest is or disease, okay? It's getting, late blight's not enough. You kind of need to have the right type of blight, okay? So be prepared. It's a little science heady, but everything you need to know about which pesticides can be used or biorational pesticides is in this, on this website, okay? What else we got? Oh, all right, common pests and diseases. That's kind of where everyone wants to be anyways, because everyone wants to talk about their pests and their diseases. So this talk is definitely going to be geared towards that now. I am going to fly through these things and then we can get to questions, but I'll do a quick little jog through common pests and diseases, okay? All right, so first things first, let's recap. Healthy soil equals healthy plants. Preventative measures first. Least ID your pest, third. Least invasive, all the way down to your biorational pesticides and fungicides. That's the steps we're going to go through. Okay. Now that we have a pest and we've ID'd it, we know what it is. Let's talk a little bit about the common ones, and then you can also add yours to the question time, because I'm sure you all have your own diseases and pests that we want to talk about. All right. Caterpillars. Everyone here has caterpillars, right? Is everyone in the room here at least vegetable growers? Yeah, okay. Everyone grow broccoli or cabbage or kale in here? Yes? All right, so you have worms, okay? You have caterpillars, not worms. All right, we're gonna call them caterpillars. They're from the Lepidoptera family, and they're all over your tomatoes and your kale and your broccoli, and they're eating it all up every single year. And many people quit growing kale and things like that and broccoli because of the caterpillars, okay? They're just trying to live and survive. Beetles and bugs, okay? Squash bugs, okay? Stink bugs, Mexican bean beetles, striped cucumber beetles, okay? Kind of like beetles and bugs, kind of is a nice little easy thing. We all have striped cucumber beetles here in Cape Cod and all over the country. Soft-bodied insects. This would include aphids, and probably one that we've all seen, maybe. Also includes cottony cushion scale, and we'll throw whitefly in here as well because it's kind of soft-bodied. Thrips are another one that we see a lot in our greenhouses and home gardens and places like that. Not so much outside because the beneficial insects outside keep them in check. So soft-bodied insects are usually maintained from the beneficial insects predominantly, particularly aphids. Aphids also have a little wasp that get in there and lay its eggs and then kill it. So really tiny little wasp can get in there and lay its eggs. But a lot of good beneficial insects attack soft-bodied insects. There's other ones that attack those three, all three of those groupings of insects. Beetles and bugs being the toughest. So the harlequin bug is a really good beneficial bug, or the minute pirate bug, right? So these guys go in there and like take out a squash bug and battle it out, right? With armor and big teeth and all that kind of stuff. So there are a lot of great beneficials that do those things, but a whole bunch more for soft-bodied and caterpillars. Diseases, blights, rot, mildew, mold, galls, okay? These are all things that are created, that are disease created. Some are funguses, some are bacteria, some are viruses. Tobacco mosaic virus is really detrimental on tomatoes, cannabis, blight, rot. Who's ever seen their tomato, strawberry get all fuzzy gray and start to just rot. That's Botrytis cinerea. Botrytis cinerea, if you're a cannabis grower, is what's called bud rot. Okay, that's what ruins your crop. At the end of the year, you get bud rot. Okay, Botrytis cinerea. Grapes, huge host for Botrytis cinerea is grapes. One of the main reasons that grapes are grown with so many pesticides to get them to grow. Okay, conventional or organic. Okay, so rots. There's who's ever had a tomato, something rot at the base, at the root. Okay, a root rot. Okay, there's all these organisms that are doing these, creating these pathogenic diseases, pathogenic organisms that are creating these various diseases. Mildew, powdery mildew. I'm sure if you've grown a squash plant or a cucumber, you've seen that white fuzzy powder on the leaf. That's powdery mildew. If you've grown zinnias or phlox in New England, I guarantee, if it's not a disease-resistant variety, you're seeing it. Okay. Molds. Okay, there's a bunch of different molds that we can get. Galls, funky little cool thing that grows on trees and shrubs. Okay, these are our common pests and diseases. Okay, these are the groupings, not the individual ones, but the groupings. I mentioned a few that are pretty common, but that's the main ones. Okay, I'm going to leave this up for a little bit for those of you at home if you want to try to write that all down. If not, I suggest emailing me and I'll send you the slides, or I'll just send you this information at davesgreens@gmail.com. Okay, once again, davesgreens@gmail.com. Okay, the first one is the integrative pest management. Super important, that's why it's on top. Okay, let's ID what we have. Second, we want to talk about, Second is, I put on here, Johnny's growers. If you go to this site, you're going to see a chart, okay, that's going to have all the common diseases and pests in your gardens and at home, okay, and on farms. Johnny Selected Seeds is geared towards the commercial farmer, myself, and then geared towards the home gardener as well. So a lot of the same products can be used for both. All of them, they all can. This is, if you go onto Johnny Selected Seeds website and you go to this link here, you go right to that chart. They're going to tell you what products are used that they sell, of course, but you can also get the general idea. Like if you're going to use spinosad to get rid of a Colorado potato beetle larvae, right? This fungus, you can look at other companies that sell spinosad, maybe a little cheaper than Johnny's. Or if you're going to go to your local nursery, you're going to say, I'd like to spray some spinosad. I'm looking for spinosad based pesticide. Okay, great chart, really cool chart. Johnny Selected Seeds is really important. I'm going to show you one in a minute, but I'll talk about it now. I already showed everyone here here live. Gardens Alive is a really great company geared towards the home gardener, totally geared towards the home gardener. A lot of phenomenal products in there. Gardens Alive, check them out. It's a great catalog. And you'll find everything you need to know and probably more charts on which ones are used for what. But between Johnny's and Gardens Alive, you have a real good start on what products that you can buy. We'll call them tools for your toolbox to have ready to go. So if you know you're going to have that cabbage looper, then you better have some BT on hand and you better have some spinosad, because 1 week you're going to spray BT, and next week you're going to spray spinosad, and you're going to go back and forth. Okay, so following the label, of course. All right, the one on the bottom is the biorational long list of information for what fungicides, organic fungicides and pesticides you can use for every kind of crop you can imagine, and every kind of pest and disease you can imagine. I'm sorry to say it is a little scientific, but all the information is there that you need. So these 3 sites, these 3 links right here is all you need to do to get started. Okay, there's books and books that you can get from the library right over there, and hopefully your local library, you Zoom folks, about organic disease and pest control. Rodell has got a great book. There's a lot of great books out there. So, but these 3 websites are going to get you all the information you need to go. Okay. Oh, we're going to go past. Oh yeah, no, we're there already. Look at that. All right, this is gonna end of my slide presentation, and as always, I want to thank the Churro Library for everyone and all the librarians, particularly Galen, who's been extremely helpful. To all my teachers, I want to thank them. For everyone, all of you guys attending on Zoom and elsewhere, I want to thank you, and I want to dedicate my educational efforts to all sentient beings. May they use my information, this education, to create a better community for us and the planet. Okay, there's my dedication, and thank you. And now it's time for questions, and I think we're going to go to live Zoom.
I'm gonna try to, yep. I'm
If
gonna
it
try
works.
to. I
let's
think
hope-
if I just close this
maybe
and,
that'll shut some- Oh, I see myself. I'm still
yay,
fuzzy looking.
okay.
Okay, so real
Okay.
quick, before I get started on the questions, and I hope some of you on Zoom have done that. I don't know if you can read that.
Garden Solutions, it's hard to read with
Okay,
this stupid
up on this
fuzzy.
corner is their logo called Gardens Alive, okay? I meant to bring this and then I forgot it, and then I got to my PO box and this was sitting in it. So it was meant to be. Gardens Alive is great, great company. And that's that. So, ooh, look, I look like I'm back, I'm not fuzzy.
You're fuzzy.
I'm still fuzzy?
Yes,
Okay.
you're not really so fuzzy, the background is.
All right, so the background's fuzzy.
Okay, we do have a couple questions.
Okay, let's hit them up.
One says, what happened to the maples last fall? Turned brown and no color. Was that a pest or too much water?
And what state are we in? Where, what, do we know?
It must be here,
Is it
I'm guessing, because they're just saying the maples.
the maples or the oaks? I'm wondering if
I remember if all the oaks with
the
from a
oaks-
couple years ago.
Oaks have
with
been
the-
wiped out pretty good,
but-
particularly by your place.
Well, maybe they'll, North Truro.
North Shore, okay. I didn't notice too many maple issues. There could be a pest doing it. There could be, did we have lack of water last summer? We had a little bit of a heat spell. We had low water in April. It could be a water thing. Chances are next year it's gonna be fine, unless it killed it, of course. But I don't know of anything specifically. I do get pest reports from Barnstable County Cooperative Extensions for all the pests and problems that they're having in the entire county. That maples never came up on my radar.
It was maybe, maybe,
Pine tip moths, the woolly adelgid, things like that. And then, of course, the gypsy moths.
yeah, the gypsy moth, but maybe that's coming, like, you can really see them now. Like, you see all the trees that died. that
Yeah,
completely
but that
died.
was a few years back. They would have been dead by this point, I think,
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
gypsy moth.
I
But
don't know.
once again, the gypsy moth is going to come back. It's a cyclical insect. So unless you locally take good care of your soil, the organisms will then help kill them, but you gotta have good soil. And then in the forest, we can't do anything about it. So yeah, gypsy moths, get ready.
Get ready, that's
BT,
right, it's
spinosyn,
time.
that's what you need.
Bunnies and voles, someone's onto mammals.
Oh, you're on the
mammal
mammals,
pests.
barriers, guns, humane trap, forget the guns. We'll go to humane traps.
Good dog.
A good dog or cat. If you really want to get creative, you can dig out your garden a few feet below the garden, dig a big trench where your garden is, line it with treated galvanized type wire, mesh wire, lay it in there. So you've created like a little basket. Okay, then you fill all that soil that you took out of there and put it back, and then make a raised bed that goes up through the soil with that wire basket attached to it. So the wire basket has to fill all that good soil that you dug up. So if you've got good soil 4 feet deep, you got to dig down 4 feet deep. You got to get that wire to stop the voles from getting through. So it's got to be a small gauge wire. They can then can't get through, and you're really
Like a
slowing
half
down.
inch, is a half inch?
The half inch is too big. You
Too
need
big.
you need really small
Wow.
stuff that you would stop mice from getting in your house. You see a lot of contractor guys putting mouse guards and protected in homes.
Mhm.
Something very similar to that. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be laborious. Other thing to do is to not grow things that they love. The voles, at least, and the moles. Gophers and things are kind of big.
What do they love?
They love root crops. They love, they love radishes.
I was
and
told
carrots.
Gum, beech nut gum, and you chew it, you put it in the hole, well, forget it, you just take it up. Put it on the side.
Oh, you tried that? It was
And I eat gum.
like an old like wives' tale kind of method where they use beech nut gum
Oh.
Okay, there's some other things that deter like rabbits and things like, what is it? And deer too. It's, what is that soap? What is that soap? It's a Irish
Oh,
Spring soap.
Yes, Irish Spring.
Irish Spring soap, you know, you could hang it, you can put shavings around, you can do all sorts of things. It's actually pretty benign for the soil. It's an old fashioned recipe, that soap. So the microorganisms are going to use it as food if it is on the soil. That smell apparently deters rabbits and deer. I've seen it do a pretty good job on deer for a day or two, and then they're like, forget it, I'm going in.
Right, got used to
So
it.
barriers, traps, you know, if you're of a like mind and you see a gopher or something else, you can shoot it, you know, I suppose. But not me, because I'm Buddhist, but you
Right.
know. So a humane Buddhist trap would be a good choice. Okay, next.
Okay, so someone has about 15 hydrangeas. They planted them a couple years ago. All of them except one doing great and flowering, but one didn't flower at all last year. Any thoughts about what could just,
So
not happen.
non-flowering hydrangeas, typically, if it is in regards to this talk, it would be a disease issue. And, you know, honestly, I'm not super knowledgeable on all the ornamentals, because particularly hydrangeas, I'm not a real fan, but I believe black sooty mold gets on there, similar to similar to roses, can get on there. Powdery mildew can certainly get on there. I believe I've heard stories of certain botrytis getting on there as well. And another blight, I'm drawing Yeah, so pruning hydrangeas is really important for disease control and for bud growth, for next year's bud growth.
sorry.
Each one each type of hydrangea needs, it has its own specific time to prune. So you really need to investigate that. So I'm guessing your lack of flower might have been the wrong pruning or maybe some winter die off you know, let's say it grows on last year's wood, and then the winter came and really hit that hard and destroyed the wood where the bud is. That could stop the flower from producing. But I'm gonna have you go to some of the local, I don't know if you're from around here or not, but if you're local, there are a lot of great gardeners, landscape companies that I can recommend. Just email me and I'll pass you on to them. And there's a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about in the landscape world, and there's a whole bunch of really good ones here. So you can ask me, email me, and I'll give you some names of some local people that are phenomenal.
Oh, somebody has a question. That's the same question I had. So I'm
Cool.
really happy. How do you support your floating row covers to keep them the proper height above your plant and whatnot?
So if your plant has it grows from a terminal shoot from the apical meristem, that is your tomatoes and peppers and things. If you damage the growing tip of that plant, if it runs into something and hits it, you're going to kill that part off, or that's going to die off and be damaged, and you're going to really ruin your crop and probably get nothing. Okay. Other plants, like I spoke about the brassicas for my salad mix, the arugulas, the squashes, the floating row cover, and then when you use for insects, you want to get the lowest, lightest grade. It just literally sits right on top of it. The important thing to do is how do you seal the edges? Okay, sandbags work great. Just digging a trench, get a hoe, make a trench, bury the edges, and then fill it back in. You want to seal it so that when the wind blows, it doesn't take it away. You also want to seal it for flea beetles because you don't want anyone getting in, right? It also works for rabbits, of course, if you're looking for lettuce and stuff. So lettuces, things that don't have a growing tip like that. Even broccoli and cabbages can handle that. But once the broccoli head starts to form or the cauliflower head starts to form, that's when you want to pull that off. But by then you should be pretty well along the way with the insects not landing there to get the plant. Okay?
And then with the leafy things, do you have to keep letting it out, or do you just make it
No,
loose enough to start?
Make it a little loose, give it, you know, it wants to have a little room to grow. If the plant starts to push it up, you'll see, and then you can either get a bigger piece, but, you know, give yourself a couple extra feet, you know, on either, you know, on the width of it or the length of it, and then just accommodate for that growth, but just let it float right on top. It's called a floating row cover for a reason. It's floating. You can also get landscape staples and pin them down. What I use on the farm, because we use such larger spaces, we take remade pipe, we wrap the remade around not rebar pipe, we wrap it around the remade, if that's confusing. That remade is the floating row cover. So we take rebar pipe, wrap it around the floating row cover, and then we take the landscape staples, the heavy duty ones, and stick them through the rebar and hold it all in place.
Wow.
It works amazing. It's costly because if you've got acres, you got a lot. So old hoses, don't throw them away, or go to the dump when someone else is throwing them away. Get them, put a cap in there, and go to the plumbing store, get end caps, cap them, fill up one side with water first, cap it, right? And then lay it down along the edges of your thing and tack it with landscape staples. Perfect. Works great.
Heavy.
Okay. I think that covers it, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
and if you are, no, it doesn't cover, because what if you want to use a tomato? So you put the tomato, particularly potatoes, because the Colorado potato beetle, it's going to look for that leaf again. And man, is it going to be a problem when the Colorado potato beetle comes. The larvae are going to decimate your crop. So if you can stop that bug, it's a beetle, comes in there, right in there, you're going to have, you're going to stop it from laying its eggs, which is going to prevent the whole problem. So in that case, we use little wire hoops that you can buy from Johnny's or Gardens Alive. I just saw in here Gardens Alive, there's a bunch of them. Probably in the beginning of the page, it's a preventative type thing, but yeah. So these little hoops get stuck in the ground on either side of your crop. They go up and over your crop, and the crop grows underneath. Once again, another benefit of floating row covers, the humidity is going to grow. So if you can put your tomatoes out a week or two early, right? If you've got good floating row cover out there. Okay, they come in different grades. So if you have a thicker grade, the lightest one is good for insects, but the higher the grade is, the more frost protected you get. So you can get frost protected down to like 15, even I think 12 degrees at some of them. So with outside temperatures 12 and your plants are growing underneath.
On the other side, when the tomatoes are getting their fruit, for example, my sister would have little chipmunks that like to come and eat the tomatoes at the end. So if your floating cover is still on, will the chipmunks ruin the cover?
You have to pull it off when it's time to flower. Okay. When it's flowering time, I'm glad we brought that up, because very important for squash. If you're growing cucumbers or squash underneath floating row cover, as soon as you see a flower, you got to pull it off, or go hand pollinate, which I'm not recommending, but you got to pull it off. Okay, you got to just hope and pray that 80% of the striped cucumber beetle has already flown over to your neighbor's yard and have made home over there at your neighbor's yard and not yours. Okay, so as soon as things start to flower, that being said, potatoes, we don't want the flower. We're typically pruning the flowers off of potato. That remake can stay on top. That floating row cover can stay. But tomatoes, tomatillos, all the pepper plants, squash, zucchini, cucumbers, all that stuff has to be uncovered.
So someone asked also about squash pests, but this row cover stuff partly.
That's the first thing. Yep. They are at squash. I mean, what squash pest? I mean,
they weren't specific.
Okay. I'm guessing we're talking striped cucumber beetles that affect squash bug,
and
okay,
that
and borers, vine borers get in there, okay, and
worm. She wrote worm.
Vine borers. That's a vine borer. I'm guessing that's a vine borer. If it's eating the fruit, it's most likely a slug or a snail. The vine borers are going to get inside the vine and make it wilt. It's going to look like it's got a disease. It's clogging the plumbing because it's in there boring away, and it's frack. Otherwise, it's called its poop. It's clogging up the vascular system, so it starts to wilt. Like you just watered it that morning, and there's enough water, and it's wilting. So you've got vine borer or disease. The disease, the squash disease, powdery mildew is the main one that I can think of offhand. There is a fusarium that will affect it. Prevention, airflow, seed variety, all those are really important. You'll be able to help minimize if you get disease-resistant seeds. Airflow is very important for disease prevention across the board, particularly for fruit trees. Very important. So on top of that, then squash bugs, are tough. Anything like a bug or a beetle are tough to get rid of. Okay. Squash bug, pyrethrum is a good one. Spinosad hits it a little bit. Is a fungus. Pyrethrum is the Roundup chrysanthemums seed again. Those are the two main ones. Diatomaceous earth will really kind of bother them, and maybe keep them down a little bit. Although once diatomaceous earth gets wet, the silica collapses and then it doesn't work as well. So diatomaceous earth is one. Neem based neem is a plant in India. India, I think it's India. Tropical plant. The oils from the leaf and stuff are used as a very effective pesticide, organic pesticide. Striped cucumber beetle is, besides the protective barriers like everything else, pyrethrum. The one that I use, if you want to know, is pyganic. I buy it through my big companies, but you can get it at Johnny's Select Seeds. I would imagine they'll have something similar in Gardens Alive. They have a lot of their own trade names, Gardens Alive. So, but a pyrethrum-based spray. You can also get pyrethrum as a dust. I don't really advise that because it's not good to breathe that in. So it's toxic for humans. Just because it's organic doesn't mean it's not toxic, right?
Same with diatomaceous earth.
Diatomaceous earth, any dust across the board. And as for disease control, on top of sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, milk, diluted milk. That's the bacillus in there. So it's actually a bacteria that's actually doing the work, but spray that on there can help get diseases down, particularly powdery mildew. I'm thinking, copper and sulfur are two big disease control. Probably going to get a tomato question, I would imagine, and then we'll talk about that, but you can use that on your squash too. I think I probably got the main ones. If I need more, I'll have them chat.
Nobody's asking tomato questions here. Does anybody here on the Zoom? Does anybody else have tomato questions?
In a container?
In the same container?
You're after the same container
Yeah.
and it has a blight? Is that what you're worried about, the blight?
Yeah.
If it's a soil-borne blight, like late blight or verticillium wilt or a whole bunch of things like that, you got to start with new soil. Yeah, it's a soil-borne organism. Unless you sterilize the soil, by heating it up, you're going to kill all the good stuff in there anyways. I would say grow flowers in that pot for a couple of years and break that cycle. Make sure that those blights aren't susceptible to those flowers, or just throw that soil in your compost, let the microorganisms, they'll do all the work for you. They'll take care of that blight for you. Bring it in the compost and then bring it back to your garden later. So you're not losing that potting soil that you bought because it's expensive and it's most likely has peat moss in it, and peat is a non-renewable resource. We're going to run out of it. So we really want to make sure that if you are using, you don't just throw away your potting soil because it's like throwing away peat. Make sure you compost all of your potting soil. So yeah, with tomatoes, what tomato question do we have? Is it specific?
That was Roberta.
Oh, okay. Is there no other tomato questions?
No.
Wow, no one has a question about tomatoes? About late blight?
Yeah.
Really? Tomato blight? Early, late blight? Nothing? All right, well, I'm going to talk about it anyways because you all have it. So, I mean, so on a typical tomato, you'll see those leaves on the bottom of the plant starting to die up. The reason it starts on the bottom is because the splashing of your irrigation and raindrops. When if you look at like on a magnified, when a raindrop hits the ground, soil particles shoot way up in the air and get on the bottom part of the plant, and then it works its way up. Okay. It also needs the right kind of humidity, right? So you start to see it when summer starts to kick in, as we get a little more humidity levels. After some rains and those kind of things, you start to see more of it. So environmental conditions, that's why airflow is really important. Give your tomatoes some space, let them breathe, okay? They really need to breathe a little bit. And they'll also get more sun on those lower lateral bud sites and give you better fruit production in there, So just give your tomatoes some air. First thing to do, I plant them 36 inches away from each other. Most home gardeners plant them 12 inches. Most people in home gardens put them about that far apart, 18, 12 inches.
Wow.
36 people from all directions, okay? Yeah, if you want more tomatoes and you like, oh, I usually plant 20 and now with Dave's recommendation, I'm only getting 12 or whatever, start another garden. or go to the farmer's market and buy mine. But yeah, 36 on center gives a lot of airflow. Airflow is really critical for disease control. If you do start to get some diseases, there's a lot of products out there, organic fungicides we can use to get rid of that stuff. Prevention is key. I no longer use this method because I'm now a Korean natural farmer and I don't use any other things except stuff I make at my farm. But we're not talking about that now. So a conventional way of dealing with tomato diseases is a sulfur and copper rotation. Okay, so when that tomato plant's green and looking really good and really healthy, right? You go, oh, I'm having the best tomato crop ever. And then that's the time to start preventatively spraying with copper and sulfur, okay? Before the fruit actually gets on the plant, okay? And if you do have fruit on the plant, you can still spray with copper and sulfur, but you have to wash your fruit off immediately. So you can do the spray. With copper, it's gonna be blue. Your leaves of your tomato plant are gonna turn blue, okay? Because copper is blue, a mineral. These are all organically approved things, okay? There are really bad chemical sulfurs and coppers. We're making sure that we're only using OMRI certified copper and sulfur. Go to Gardens Alive or Johnny's and that's what you find. If you get that blue on your tomato, you got to wipe it off. First off, because you don't want to eat that later, but the sun will hit that. It will have a phytotoxicity to the fruit and you get a little canker looking thing and then it will start to rot there. So if you do get copper or sulfur on your fruit of your tomato or eggplant or pepper, you got to wash that off right
So
away.
are you just spraying the bottom of the plant?
Always the key thing when you're doing any kind of spraying, whether it's insects or diseases, you really want to get a thorough covering on the bottom, particularly for organic fungicides and pesticides that are biological. Those bacteria, those funguses they don't like the sun, okay? They want to come on the underside of the leaf and protect the plant from the underside.
So
Okay?
all the way up the whole plant?
All the way up. So you want to spray the underside first. In the process of that, you're going to end up spraying the top too. You're going to have some drip, like some runoff that's going to get on other leaves. But you really want to thoroughly coat the bottom underside of the leaves. That's the key thing. And then do a light quick spray. Make sure you get all the top too. And stems.
You might have to wipe a lot of tomatoes if you have a lot.
If you have, at that point, you should have already had the preventative measures sort of prevented the blight from coming, and you're not going to need it by the time you're in fruit production. You might have some little ones.
So how can you tell when you don't need it anymore?
When things are looking great and you don't have it and your neighbors have it. When everyone's saying, oh my God, my tomatoes are awful. I've lost all my tomatoes. I got this blight and everyone's talking about it, which is like beginning of August around here and mostly here in New England. So when everyone starts seeing that and talking about it and yours are still green, you're doing good. Now you can, I on my farm, as a preventive measure, 1 week sulfur, the next week copper. It's actually not a week, it's 10 days. So 10 days copper, 10 days sulfur, 10 days copper, 10 days sulfur. That really gets the diseases, really mixing them up and different modes of action kill and destroy them. But use the least amount as you feel comfortable with, okay, that you can afford, or whatever. I recommend using the wettable spray copper and sulfur because the dusts work great, but you need a special implement, a tool to disperse it. And it's not good to breathe.
Peaches, the leaves, when they get bulbs, I cut them on those leaves off.
Yeah.
The last 2 years, and I got fruit. But is that, what is?
The fruit came from our good pollination year. I'm pretty convinced of that. We talked about that last week.
Bubbly stuff that gets on.
There's all different types of them. There's diseases that all different ones that do that. It's probably peach leaf curl is probably what I'm guessing you have, but without actually seeing it. So there's very similar symptoms for 3 or 4 different diseases, okay? And then there's some even insects that'll go inside the leaf and from the inside destroy it and make kind of the same looking thing. So there's a few there, but typically it's peach leaf curl, okay? And once again, it's a preventative thing. Airflow is important, making sure that the peach tree is pruned where it has a very open center. So when you're pruning, you want to prune to the outside bud. You want to find the bud in that branch that's pointing outside, not shooting in, which will then clog up the center of the tree, giving it bad airflow. You want to prune to the outside bud, which opens up the plant, okay, and lets in more air. That's the first thing to do. The second thing to do is to do a preventative spray. And also, before bud break, you want to do that horticultural spray. If you have a lot of this pest or this peach leaf curl. If you have, if you get it year after year after year, sacrifice the fruit and then spray dormant horticultural oil on a year, all summer long, and work on disease control that year, and realize that. Or if you only have 1 or 2 fruit, let them go and then start to work on that. But if you do take that leaf off, I would not put it in your compost pile. If you, that's the thing for your fireplace or something like that, or bring it out to the woods, let Mother Nature do it, so you're not losing that. Yeah. So the other thing to do is that while you got that plastic bag, why don't you put one in there and send it to UMass Extension's cooperatives through Barnstable County Cooperatives and find out exactly what you have, and then we can really nail down the way of doing it. And that's goes with any diseases that you might have.
That's a great idea. I like that. I think that's it on Zoom.
Great. All right. So listen, find the bugs that you have, ID them, and find the products for your toolbox that you're going to need. And that's it. And then, oh, I already showed them.
Yep.
Gardens Alive. And I just have one more thing I want to talk about. We kind of started to talk about it a couple of talks ago. We were talking about seeds, and it kind of brought up the topic about our seed library here. So we are contemplating it, and send me some emails or send the library some emails. If you're interested, we're thinking about doing a seed saving talk where we can encourage home gardeners to start to save some seeds, because we talked about open pollinated seeds, heirloom seeds. That's kind of how the seed thing started. There was a whole lot of us locally that did that. They offset and supplemented with Fedco seeds, I believe, in the past, which is great. But if we as a community or wherever you live can build up a seed library where those genetics and those traits of churro or Barnstable or Boston, right, grown seeds over time, if you keep growing that, the genetics will actualize and start to really benefit with your climate, your disease pressure, your weed pressure, everything. So if we can start to, as a community, start to save seeds, okay? So those of you like doom and gloom Armageddon people, we should all be saving seeds so we have them, because we might not be able to go to Johnny's Seed Catalog someday. So let's teach everyone. I'll teach a class, or someone will teach a class.
Yeah.
I know a couple good people right here locally that can help. We can get a class going here, and if you're interested, let us know. It's something that we can do a class like in May or June. This class is kind of pertinent because we got to get your toolbox ready. You got to create healthy soil, right? There's a process here. You got to plan your garden. And then next we're going to talk about Beyond Organic, which is mind blowing.
Yeah, I can't wait for that next week. Yep.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. No more questions.
No,
We're good.
that's good.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate it. Thank you so much to our library.
See you next week if you're.
All right. Bye.
Bye.